All right, so Claude Code just went head-to-head with Antigravity across 4 real developer workflows, and the final score was 7 wins to 4 with 5 ties. The scoreboard looks lopsided, but the story behind it is way more interesting than those numbers suggest. We're running Claude Code versus Antigravity across 4 real tests right now, because both tools just hit major updates in 2026, and developers are actually picking between them today, and every claim here traces to a vendor doc, a press report, or a community blog. So no vendor money, no made-up numbers. And yeah, Claude Code does win more tests, but there's one area where Antigravity has a really specific advantage that could flip the whole decision for you depending on how you work. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Okay, so who is this for? If you're a developer or a team lead trying to pick an autonomous coding agent right now, both tools run long autonomous tasks, touch multiple files, and cost real money. So picking the wrong one means either overpaying, hitting a cost spike, or missing a workflow feature you actually need every single day. Guess one is terminal workflow integration. And this one matters because the terminal is where these agents actually live. So if a tool has a weak install story, no session memory, or can't run headless in a pipeline, it's going to slow you down every day. And we looked at install paths, session persistence, and how well each tool handles being run without a human watching. So here's what we got. Claude Code ships via curl, homebrew, and winget across 3 operating systems and reads a cloud.md file at session start, so it remembers your project context, while Antigravity retired the Gemini CLI in June 2026 and now runs a Go binary plus a desktop app. And the session persistence comparison is only partial, because Antigravity's equivalent mechanism just isn't documented in the available evidence. Claude Code takes test 1 because it has more install paths, documented session memory via CLU, DMD, and a headless flag for scripted use that Antigravity doesn't have on record, so that puts the running score at 1 to 0, and Antigravity does get credit for being terminal first by design. But on raw maturity, Claude Code is ahead. Test 2 is pricing structure. And honestly, this one is so important because cost surprises are a real thing with agentic tools, and one bad sub-agent fan-out, and you could be looking at a bill you did not plan for. So we compared free tier availability, the full paid tier stack, and how exposed you are to cost spikes on each platform. Okay, so Antigravity has a genuine $0 free tier with no credit card required, rate-limited access to all models including Claude Sonnet 4.6, and quota refreshing every 5 hours, while Claude Code has no free tier at all. And both tools lend at $20, $100, and $200 a month for paid tiers, which is pretty interesting. But Claude Code has 8 documented cost spike patterns, and 1 sub-agent fan-out incident hit $47,000. Antigravity takes test 2 because that free tier is real and the cost spike risk on Claude Code is documented and serious, which ties things up at 1 apiece. And I mean, Claude Code's max 20 times plan covers $600 to $1,500 in API tokens for a flat $200 a month, which is great if you're a heavy user, but a spike risk is hard to ignore. The gap here is smaller than it looks if you're a heavy user, because Claude Code's flat rate ceiling is genuinely good value once you're spending real API money. But Antigravity's overage pricing is credits-based, which sounds safer, except the credit to token conversion rate isn't published, so you can't fully compare the two on cost predictability, and it kind of depends on your usage pattern. Test 3 is multi-file code-based context, and this one matters because nobody wants a coding agent that can only see 1 file at a time. So if you're building a real feature, you need the tool to hold migrations, routes, services, and tests all in mind at once. And we looked at how each tool handles multi-file edits, persistent project memory, and multi-repo scope. Claude Code handled a 10-file feature addition in 1 prompt, reading all dependencies before writing anything, which is really impressive. And Antigravity's project model explicitly supports multiple folders like a front-end and back-end repo in 1 project with isolated agent settings. So Claude Code wins on persistent cross-session memory via cloud.md, but Antigravity wins on multi-repo scope. And the evidence depth is different for each tool here, so this isn't a clean side-by-side. Test 3 is a tie too close to call because both tools handle multi-file context well, but through totally different architectures, and the evidence gaps make a clean winner call impossible. So the running tally sits at 1 win each with 1 tied. And honestly, that split tells you something real about how each tool is designed. If you work in a monorepo or a single service code base, Claude Code's CLAU DADMD layered memory is probably the better fit. But if you're juggling a front-end and a back-end as separate folders, Antigravity's project model is actually purpose-built for that. So this one genuinely depends on your project structure, and not on which tool is objectively better. Test 4 is autonomous task completion. And this is really the core use case both tools are competing on, because you want to give the agent a goal, walk away and come back to finished work. So we looked at end-to-end execution, scheduled overnight tasks, parallel sub-agents, and whether each tool can run inside a CI/CD pipeline without a human in the loop. Both tools have a /goal pattern that writes a plan, auto approves it, and executes end-to-end, and both support scheduled recurring tasks for overnight runs and run parallel sub-agents, though those are vendor claims and not independently verified. So take that with a grain of salt. And Claude Code does have a documented headless flag with JSON output for CI/CD pipelines, while no equivalent is documented for anti-gravity. Test 4 is a tie, too close to call on the core autonomous execution capability, which puts the final benchmark score at 1 win apiece with 2 tied, and the CI/CD headless edge goes to Claude Code. But on the actual autonomous task completion pattern, both tools are doing the same thing at the same capability level. The parallel sub-agent claims from both sides are vendor only right now with no independent benchmark comparing them on identical tasks. So I don't want to oversell the gap, and if you're running overnight jobs or scheduled automations, both tools cover that. But the real differentiator is the headless CI/CD flag, and that only matters if you're wiring this into a pipeline. So where does Claude Code clearly win? Terminal maturity, full stop, with more install paths, persistent CLA.md, session memory, up arrow history across sessions, headless CI/CD via the no interactive flag with JSON output that anti-gravity doesn't have on record. Max 20x plan, covering $600 to $1,500 in API tokens for a flat $200 a month, and live external data via MCP server connections built right into the context system. And where does anti-gravity clearly win? The free tier is real, $0 a month, no credit card, rate-limited access to all models, including Claude Sonnet 4.6 and GPT OS 120B, plus multi-repo projects where you drop the front-end and back-end folder into one project with isolated agent settings, lower documented cost spike risk compared to Claude Code's 8 documented spike patterns, and a CLI that's purpose-built for terminal-first autonomous work. Okay, so here's the decision rule. If you need headless CI/CD integration, MCP live data, and you're already deep in Anthropic's ecosystem, go Claude Code. And if you need a free entry point before you commit, you're working across multiple repos, or cost predictability matters more than ceiling value, go anti-gravity. And that's really it. Use case first, tool second.